This is Think Out Loud on OPB. I'm Dave Miller. Starting as early as next month, Oregonians will be able to bet on professional sports through a state-run mobile app. The service will be called Oregon Lottery Scoreboard. It'll be available on mobile phones for people 21 and over inside the state of Oregon. One thing you won't be able to do is bet on college sports. Only professional ones will be available. For more on the world that the Oregon Lottery is about to dip its toes into, I'm joined by James Murphy. He is a longtime odds maker and sports book consultant, and he is a casino culture writer for CasinoInsider.com. James Murphy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You've been critical of Oregon and the Oregon Lottery in recent weeks, in particular for not including college sports off the bat. They've said they might include them in the future. Why do you think that, in particular, is such a bad decision?
Well, for one thing, you're eliminating. There's several reasons. For one thing, you're kind of eliminating about 45 to 50% of your revenue. And from the lottery standpoint, there's really two good goals for implementing college or for implementing sports betting. Number one, because the people want to play it and enjoy it, and number two, you want to bring in revenue. And there goes half your revenue out the window.
Because that's right now, in terms of sports betting, almost half of it is, say, on college football.
On college football and college basketball primarily. There's very minuscule betting on like college hockey and college baseball, but the overwhelming majority is on basketball and football. And college football is the second most heavily bet sport behind the NFL. And a secondary problem is that by having college football on the board, it's kind of a risk management thing, kind of built in. And
why is that?
Well, what I'm really interested in seeing what happens is every now and then there's 32 teams in the NFL, so basically all the results are correlated. Some teams got to win, some teams got to lose. There are weekends where all the favorites win, and sports books and bookmakers, they just take a bath financially. And I'm not sure that the Oregon Department of Revenue or whoever the Oregon Lottery reports to, they're ready to have them come in and have them tell, hey, we lost $9 million this weekend. I don't really know how they're going to respond to that.
And is it thinking that veteran sports betting managers, people who run sports betting books, they deal with that? They can swallow that kind of loss and know that they'll make it up in successive weeks, but they don't mind that temporary pain?
Yeah, and that's basically it. And it's kind of a joke. In Las Vegas, I've lived there off and on for a number of years. And I did a radio show there, so I've kind of have some radio experience. The joke is never listen to a bookmaker talking about how poor he is, because what happens is it's always a big news story, and they're always on all the radio shows talking about, well, we got killed this weekend, we lost 7 figures, but they don't come on the other 15 weeks of the year when they make 7 or 8 figures. It's net, it's difficult to lose money at sports betting if you know what you're doing. And my concern about the Oregon Lottery is they've not done this before. It's I think they're approaching it like it's another lottery game, like they're adding a scratch-off game or whatever. But it's a very complex, difficult, and kind of its own animal. It's not really just something you can look at just as another component of the lottery.
I want to get into those bigger questions about what it means to run something like this. But just sticking with the college exclusion for a second, I want to run an explanation that lottery spokesperson Matt Shelby gave to the site Sports Handle recently. He said this: As we've been looking to get back into the sports betting market, it's been more than a decade since we've had any, we're kind of easing into it. Professional sports is an easier sell to the broader audience. We may revisit wagering on collegiate events later on. It's a business decision for it right now. There is concern on our commission about adding colleges. Never say never, but we thought it best to shy away from colleges right now. What do you think of that comment?
As I said on the article I wrote, I think it's probably one of the silliest betting comments I've ever heard. For one, just the presumption that because Oregon hasn't been in the sports betting business, that people are unfamiliar with the concept. That's kind of a non-starter right there. And basically, it's I don't really get a reason out of that. It's it's a lot of it. It's just kind of a PR double talk. It's like, okay, we don't want to do this. We think it's basically it's they don't give a really good rationalization for the true reason why they don't want to do it.
Besides the lack of college sports, for now, as they say, maybe they'll revisit that in the future. What do you think of the system that Oregon is in the process of setting up?
Well, they bought the package, the platform from a company called SB Tech, which is a very well-regarded company based in Malta. And so that'll probably work just fine.
In other words, they're not creating their own software for this.
No, and that was probably one of the best decisions they've made because it's like I said, sports betting is $1 trillion worldwide industry. And very technologically intense. There's a lot of data that has to move. There's a lot of information, a lot of risk management, a lot of financial stuff. And it's something that you don't really want to get into unless you know what you're doing. And SB Tech's very good. But what I'm concerned about is I'm not aware, and again, it's hard getting a straight answer out of the Oregon Lottery. I'm not aware that they're doing any management for the Oregon Lottery. To the best of my knowledge, they're going to try to manage it themselves, which again, is something you really don't want to do unless you've got a lot of experience at it.
Now, Oregon is not exactly new to sports betting. We are one of the few states
Correct.
that was grandfathered in when Congress basically outlawed sports betting in the early 1990s. How did the sports action NFL parlay game work back then?
It was basically a basic parlay concept. You had to bet on 3 or more games every week. And paid off, accordingly for how many games you bet. You lose one, you've lost, and that may be one of the reasons they think they're in a position to run it. But the problem is, lotteries in general, they have a really high what we call hold in the business. That's basically the theoretical edge of quote unquote the house. For lotteries like Powerball or whatnot, it's around 50%. For
meaning
sports betting,
if I bet $2 with some kind of Oregon lottery product, every time people do that, the state is going to keep at least 50% of that.
Yeah, in theory. I mean, obviously there's variances. Some people win jackpots, some people don't. But in the big picture, they keep 50% of every dollar wagered. Sports betting, the theoretical hold is around, depending on, and there's a few variations on exactly what price you're betting on or whatnot. It's anywhere between 2.5% to 5%. And that's theoretical because unlike the lottery or unlike video poker, you can't control all the numbers. There's an intelligence quotient and an intellectual component to being a good sports bettor. And people can outwork you. They can know more than you do. And that's something you can't do with a Powerball card.
So this is much more about margins, it seems, about getting more and more people to bet. That's the way the state would actually bring in significant revenue from sports betting.
That's correct. And the problem, getting back to sports action, parlay cards, which is basically what that was, they have a hold, and depending on a few specifics to the rules, they have a hold anywhere from like 20 to 40%. So that's kind of up in the lottery realm. But just your basic straight sports bet, a side or a total of a football game, it's a razor thin margin. And even professional bookmakers, if they don't know, if they don't do their job right, they can lose money. And that's not really a good thing if you're hoping to bring in revenue for the state.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking right now with James Murphy. He's a longtime odds maker, sportsbook consultant, and casino culture writer for CasinoInsider.com. We're talking about the sports gambling mobile app that the Oregon Lottery hopes to launch by the start of the NFL season. There have been some questions about maybe having that be pushed back because they want to make sure it's fully operational and fully works before they actually release it. Obviously, this state has a recent history in the last 5 years or so of releasing. I'm thinking in particular about the healthcare marketplace software that they built themselves with the help of Oracle that was an unmitigated disaster. Mm-hmm. This seems very different because another company that seems much more established is actually providing a kind of off-the-shelf system. But it wouldn't surprise me if that's in the background of state officials when they were thinking about this. James Murphy, let's turn to the existing world of sports betting, because you mentioned that this is currently a $1 trillion business. How does sports betting currently work? Setting aside all these new states that, after a recent Supreme Court case, say they want to get into the action.
Well, you have to understand it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just a U.S. thing. And the figure we've always been given, in the sports betting industry, is that what they did legally in Las Vegas for a number of years, $200-300 million of profit a year, that represented anywhere from 0.5% to 2% of the worldwide total. And I would say it's probably closer to 0.5%. In India, betting on cricket's huge, and throughout Europe, betting on soccer is massive. England's got probably more bookmakers per capita than any country in the world. And there's a lot of a underground market, too. There's a lot of what I would call a gray market for offshore sports betting, including a number of sites that serve U.S. clients. And then there's your underground, bookmaker. It's not really the bookie, like Rocky's boss in the first Rocky movie, shaking down people who can't pay. It's even the what we call locals in sports betting parlance. They're very sophisticated now. They use a lot of the same software packages that you'd see in a sports book in Las Vegas.
Huh. So even completely independent folks who are running their own, I guess, illegal sports betting systems, they're also using software.
They use software for everything. It's really not much different. There are companies, there's several in Costa Rica, one actually a really good friend of mine runs, that do nothing but sell software services to independent bookmakers.
Is bookies as a word, is that a derogatory term at this point? You're
Not
talking
really.
about bookmakers, but I think the classic phrase is bookies.
Yeah, and they don't mind being called bookies. It kind of has a connotation of some sort of thug in the 1940s noir movie.
That one of their heavies will break your leg if you don't pay up.
That's not really the reality of it.
Well, how do people? I mean, this isn't. I mean, unlike the lottery where they're going to make you pay because it's connected to your debit card or credit card, I imagine. How do they make people pay?
Well, what they do, pretty much the same way the lottery will. They take credit cards. They take various payment transmissions, Western Union, PayPal, Bitcoin. They've really done a lot with cryptocurrency, which is something I'm actually doing an article on right now, is how the independent bookmakers have really embraced cryptocurrency. But it's, like I said, it's nothing like, the image from, your 1950s noir movies. They're a very professional outfit. A lot of them are post up. They'll make, until they get to know you, they make you pay in advance, just like the lottery would. Once they do know you, they'll extend credit, but they don't. It's not a case where they want you to run up a big bill and then come break your legs. That's not good for business. They're like any other business.
So if they are like any other business now and operating offshore, and if they are very popular with people all over the world, including all the states and including in Oregon, then what do you think it would take for the Oregon Lottery to actually be able to be successful in peeling away existing sports bettors who are perfectly happy using offshore bookmakers?
Well, that is a great question, and that's what I think a lot of the states that have gotten into sports betting don't realize. They're entering a very competitive business. Whether they like it or not, or whether they realize it or not, it's already a very competitive business, and you're competing against companies that do a very good job at it and have done so for a long time. Just to give you some idea, everyone I know in Las Vegas, where obviously there's a multitude of sports books in town, everyone I know in Las Vegas has at least a half dozen offshore sports betting accounts as well. One of the fundamental premises of successful sports betting is what we call shopping points. And that's basically, if you want to bet on, say, the Atlanta Falcons in the preseason next week, you compare the odds at various sports books to get the best price. So, in theory, you want as many outs, that's kind of what we call them, as many independent lines to evaluate as you can get. So really, I'm not sure that a lottery in any, just a single out run by a lottery, Delaware's basically doing the same thing. I don't think they're going to take any business away from offshore sports books. If anything, what I think might happen, and Oregon will be a great a great marketing gimmick for offshore books, because in Oregon, what's going to happen is people who aren't experienced bettors will start betting, and then a couple weeks in, they'll say, well, hey, why can't I bet on, Alabama? Why can't I bet on Notre Dame? Why can't I bet on the Ducks or the Beavers? And then they will, it's not hard to find somewhere to bet. And that's something else a lot of the states don't realize. Anyone who's wanted to place a bet for the past 15 years has been able to do so. It's not like a pin-up demand situation.
You don't think that there might be people who want to bet but were somehow turned off or fearful of the idea of offshore betting? I'm thinking about people who maybe were interested in using cannabis but didn't while it was illegal, or didn't very much. And then when the state said, all right, you can do it legally, here's how, that maybe more people said, all right, I'll return to this. I'll try this again. Is that possible for sports betting?
This is possible. I don't think it's a huge, a huge percentage of the population. It's, I would say earlier in the life cycle of offshore sports betting, or earlier in the internet era, that might be more of a reality. But people are comfortable with the concept of sending money online now, and really, as far as anyone who's got any exposure to sports betting, or really even just sports, they're comfortable with the concept of books in Costa Rica or Panama or wherever serving their sports betting needs. So I'm not sure that there's a huge market in that. And there may be a market of novices who've never bet before, who are just now getting into it, and it's an easy way to get into it. But they'll very quickly outgrow what is being offered, and then they'll become a client of like BetOnline.com or one of the other great offshore books.
I have to ask you, because we've been talking about sports betting, but I mentioned at the beginning you are a veteran odds maker, and my understanding is now your weekly business is less about college football or the NBA and more about reality television.
Correct.
What are you doing?
I do odds on pretty much anything, you name it. I still do some work on your basic sports, but I do odds on award shows, the MTV Video Awards, pretty much anything you name, anything you see on TV that has a predictive component to it. I probably done odds on it. It's a lot of fun. It's a challenge. Right now, Big Brother's something I do every week.
How do you go about it? So are you just a diehard Big Brother fan?
No, actually, I watched the show at the first of the year just to get an idea of the personalities and everything. And then from that point, I kind of follow a lot of the online communities like Reddit and several of the other ones that are the diehard fans. And because what we're doing as bookmakers, we're not so much trying to predict the outcome ourselves just to show how smart we are. Our goal is to reflect the public opinion, because that's how we shape betting handle. We want everything to even out. And the way we do that is we basically listen to the public. It's it's a little easier in college, like college and pro sports, because there's a lot of history at it. There's a lot of statistics available, but it's a bit of an adventure doing it for reality TV or some of the other things. I did a lot on Game of Thrones, like who would be the next person to die on Game of Thrones, who would end up sitting on the Iron Throne. And, so basically, you name it, I've done odds on it.
If you immerse yourself in this way to think about whether it's, narrative television or live sports, does it mean that you stop caring about those things in their pure form?
That's a good question, and that's something people ask a lot. I personally have always been able to compartmentalize it pretty well. A good example is, I could be, when I was living in South Carolina a number of years ago, I could be at a party where everybody's watching the South Carolina Gamecocks play and enjoying that atmosphere while betting on the other side of the game. That's a good question. Some people do. I can't say I've ever been a huge sports fan. I love hockey and boxing. Those are kind of my two favorite sports. But for hockey and boxing, it really hasn't taken any of my enjoyment out of it, handicapping and betting on it.
James Murphy, thanks very much for your time. It was fun talking to you.
Thank you. And just check us out, CasinoInsider.com, and we have odds and information on everything you can imagine.
That's James Murphy. He is an odds maker and a sports book consultant. He writes for CasinoInsider.com. Coming up after a break, we're going to hear about a new study out of Portland State University. It looked at what it would take for the 3 Portland area counties to come together to solve the region's affordable housing and homelessness crises.